The morning rush at Donovan's diner was in full swing. The clinking of silverware against plates mixed with the hum of conversations and the occasional burst of laughter. Through it all, Lily moved with practiced ease, a coffee pot in one hand and a notepad in the other. "Here you go, Mr. Peterson, coffee, black, just how you like it," Lily said with a warm smile as she refilled the cup of the elderly man who sat at table 7 every Tuesday morning. "Thank you, dear," he replied, looking up from his crossword puzzle. "You're always so good at remembering." What Mr. Peterson and the other regular customers at Donovan's didn't know was that Lily had a near-perfect memory, not just for coffee preferences, but for the intricate patterns of music that had once filled her life. Lily Chen had been working at Donovan's for almost 3 years now. To the lunch crowd, she was just the quiet waitress with kind eyes who never mixed up their orders. The breakfast regulars knew her as the girl who could somehow manage the morning chaos without breaking a sweat. And to Frank, the owner, she was the most reliable employee he'd had in 20 years of running the place. "Order up," called Vince from the kitchen, sliding 2 plates of pancakes onto the pass-through counter. Lily tucked her notepad into her apron pocket and grabbed the plates. As she served a young couple their breakfast, her mind wandered to the piece she'd been working on late last night, a Chopin nocturne that had kept her up until 2 a.m. Her fingers twitched slightly as they released the plates, muscle memory wanting to shape the delicate arpeggios. "Can we get some more syrup?" the woman asked. "Of course," Lily replied, snapping back to the present moment. "I'll bring that right over." Nobody at the diner knew about Lily's other life. They didn't know that after her shifts ended, she would walk 12 blocks to her tiny apartment where a second-hand upright piano waited for her. They didn't know that the slightly calloused fingertips that handed them menus had once danced across the keys of concert grands. They certainly didn't know that the plain gold band she wore wasn't from a husband, but had belonged to her piano teacher, the woman who had been like a grandmother to her before passing away 2 years ago. "Hey Lily, can you take table 9? I need to step out for a smoke," her coworker Danny asked, already untying her apron. "Sure thing," Lily nodded, even though her feet were already aching 4 hours into her shift. As the lunch rush died down, Lily found herself wiping down the counter near the front window, her favorite spot in the diner. From here she could see people rushing by, each with their own stories. Sometimes she made up little melodies in her head for them, staccato notes for the hurried businessman, flowing legato for the young mother pushing a stroller, playful grace notes for the children skipping along. 5 years ago, Lily's life had looked completely different. She had been in her second year at the prestigious Eastman School of Music, her future bright with possibility. She still remembered the weight of the acceptance letter in her hands, how her hands had trembled with excitement. Growing up in a small town where her talent had always been something of an oddity, finding a place where everyone shared her passion had felt like finally coming home. But life had other plans. Her father's sudden heart attack had changed everything. With her mother already gone for years and no siblings to share the burden, Lily had left school to care for him. The medical bills had piled up, and one by one, dreams had been set aside for practicality. Her scholarship had been deferred, then ultimately lost. The grand piano she'd grown up playing had been sold to pay for hospital stays. After her father passed, there was nothing to go back to in her hometown, and returning to school seemed impossible with the debt she now carried. So she had landed in Cleveland, picked for no reason other than a cheap bus ticket and a help wanted ad she'd seen online for Donovan's diner. "Lily, you got a minute?" Frank called from the back office, interrupting her thoughts. "Coming," she replied, setting aside her cleaning rag. Frank Donovan was a good boss, fair and straightforward. In his 60s now, with salt and pepper hair and permanent smile lines around his eyes, he had run the diner since inheriting it from his own father. The place hadn't changed much over the decades. Same vinyl booths, same black and white tiles on the floor, same vintage jukebox in the corner that worked only when it wanted to. "Schedule for next week," he said, handing her a printed sheet. "I gave you Saturday off like you asked." "Thanks, Frank, I really appreciate it." Saturday was the day of the community recital at the senior center where she volunteered once a month. It wasn't a concert hall, but playing for the elderly residents who appreciated the music was the closest she got to performing these days. "Everything okay with you? You seem a little distracted today." Lily tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "Just tired. Was up late." Frank nodded, though his eyes held a question he didn't ask. "Well, don't work yourself too hard. We need you in top shape around here." What Lily didn't tell him was that she'd been up late because a piece of mail had arrived yesterday, a flyer for the Cleveland Symphony Orchestra's new season. One of the featured pieces was the very same Rachmaninoff concerto she had been preparing for her junior year recital when she'd had to leave school. Seeing it had unleashed a flood of memories and emotions, and she'd found herself at the piano until her fingers ached and her eyes burned with exhaustion and unshed tears. Back on the diner floor, the afternoon lull had settled in. Only a few tables were occupied, a pair of teenagers sharing a milkshake, an old woman with a paperback novel, and a businessman typing on his laptop. Lily refilled coffee cups and cleared plates on autopilot, her mind still circling around the symphony flyer she'd pinned to her refrigerator at home. Perhaps she would go just to listen. She had been saving a little each month for a piano tuning. Maybe she could use some of that money for a ticket instead. "Do you play?" The question jolted her from her thoughts. The businessman at table 4 was looking at her curiously, his laptop now closed. "I'm sorry?" Lily asked, confused by the unexpected question. He gestured toward her hands. "You were drumming your fingers on the table just now." It wasn't random, it was the left-hand part of a piece. "Chopin, I think?" Lily felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. She hadn't realized she'd been doing that. "Oh, yes, it's a nocturne. I was practicing it last night." "So you do play?" It wasn't a question this time. "I used to," she said, the words carrying more weight than the stranger could possibly understand. He nodded, seeming to sense her reluctance to elaborate. "Well, whoever taught you did a good job. Not many people would recognize that pattern just from watching fingers tap on a table." "Thank you," Lily said quietly, collecting his empty mug. "Would you like more coffee?" "No, thanks. Just the check when you get a chance." As she walked away to print his bill, Lily felt a familiar ache in her chest. It was always bittersweet when her two worlds collided like this, when something from her past life of music slipped into her present reality of order pads and tip jars. At the end of her shift, Lily counted her tips, just enough to cover her electricity bill this month with a little left over. As she hung up her apron in the back room, she caught sight of something she usually tried to ignore. The old upright piano tucked away in the corner of the diner, covered with a faded cloth. It had been there since the days when Donovan's had featured live music, back when Frank's father ran the place. Now it served mainly as extra storage space, its bench piled with napkins and spare menus. Lily had never touched it, had deliberately avoided even looking at it too closely. Playing on a public piano felt too much like the life she'd lost, a reminder of what could have been. Besides, Frank had mentioned once that it probably hadn't been tuned in 20 years. "See you tomorrow." "Frank," she called toward the office. "Wait up. I'll walk you out," he replied, appearing in the doorway. "It's getting dark earlier these days." They stepped out into the cool evening air, Frank locking the door behind them. "Almost October," he commented, looking up at the darkening sky. "Time flies." Lily nodded, pulling her light jacket closer around her. Sunday brunches will be getting busier soon. The fall and winter months always brought more customers seeking warm food and shelter from the Cleveland cold. "Speaking of Sunday brunch," Frank said, "Tom called earlier. Said he's got some gig out of town and won't be able to play this weekend." Tom was the elderly piano player who came in every Sunday to provide live music during brunch, simple tunes that created a pleasant atmosphere but never demanded much. "Attention, that's too bad," Lily said. "The regulars will miss him." "Yeah, thought about just using the radio, but it's not the same." Frank sighed, then glanced at her with a curious expression. "Hey, didn't you say once that you played? Maybe you could fill in just this once?" The question hit Lily like a physical force. She had mentioned it once, very casually, when Frank had asked about her hobbies shortly after hiring her. She downplayed it then, saying she played a little, never revealing the years of training or the dreams she'd abandoned. "Oh, I don't think I could," she stammered. "It's been a long time, and I'm sure that piano needs work, and just think about it," Frank said gently. "No pressure, but the offer's there if you want it. Could throw in a little extra, too." With a friendly wave, he headed toward the parking lot, leaving Lily standing on the sidewalk, her heart racing at the unexpected proposition. As she began her 12-block walk home, her mind filled with conflicting thoughts. Part of her immediately rejected the idea. Playing in public again was too painful, too reminiscent of what she had lost. But another part, a quieter voice she usually managed to silence, wondered, what if? By the time she reached her apartment building, the streetlights had come on, casting pools of light on the sidewalk. Lily looked up at her third-floor window, knowing what waited for her there. A small space that had become both sanctuary and prison, and the piano that was both her greatest joy and most painful reminder. What would happen if she said yes to Frank's offer? What would it feel like to play for others again, even in a small diner on a Sunday morning? As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Lily realized her fingers were once again moving of their own accord, playing invisible keys in the air. Not Chopin this time, but something simpler, the kind of tune that might make a perfect background for Sunday brunch. Lily woke up earlier than usual on Sunday morning. She had barely slept, her mind racing with thoughts about Frank's offer. After tossing and turning most of the night, she had finally made a decision around 3 a.m. she would play. Just this once, just a few simple tunes during brunch, nothing fancy, nothing that would stir up too many memories. Now, as the first light of day filtered through her thin curtains, she sat at her own piano, running through some easy pieces she thought might work for the diner atmosphere. Her fingers felt stiff, and not just from the early morning chill in her apartment. It was the nervousness. Even thinking about playing in front of others again made her stomach twist into knots. It's just brunch at Donovan's, she told herself aloud, not Carnegie Hall. She picked out a few jazz standards, some gentle classical pieces that wouldn't demand too much attention from the diners, and even a couple of folk songs she'd arranged herself years ago. After an hour of practice, she got ready for work, choosing her usual black pants and white shirt, the unofficial uniform at Donovan's. As she pinned her name tag to her shirt, she caught her reflection in the mirror. She looked the same as any other day, but something felt different. The walk to the diner seemed both longer and shorter than usual. The streets were quiet, with only a few joggers and dog walkers out at this hour on a Sunday. When she arrived, Frank was already there, sorting through delivery invoices at the counter. "Morning, Lily," he said with a smile. "Danny called in sick, so I'm glad you're here early. We might be short-handed for the rush." Lily nodded, hanging up her jacket. She took a deep breath. "About the piano." Frank looked up, eyebrows raised. "I'll do it. Just for today," she said quickly before she could change her mind. Frank's face broke into a wide smile. "That's great. The regulars will love having live music. I was thinking you could play during the busiest time from about 10 to 11:30. "Okay," Lily agreed, her voice steadier than she felt. "But I should warn you that piano probably needs tuning." Frank waved a hand dismissively. "Nobody's going to notice. They just want some nice background music with their eggs and coffee." As they prepared the diner for opening, Lily kept glancing at the old piano in the corner. Now that she had agreed to play it, the instrument seemed to have a presence it hadn't before. She wondered when it had last been played properly, who had sat on that bench over the decades. When Frank stepped into the kitchen, she walked over to it and carefully lifted the dusty cloth cover. The upright was older than she'd thought, probably from the 1940s. Its dark wood was scratched in places, and one corner was slightly damaged, but it had character. Carefully, she lifted the fallboard to reveal the keys, yellowed ivory and chipped in spots, but all present. She pressed one key silently, feeling the weight and resistance, heavier than her piano at home. "Want to try it out before we open?" Frank asked, appearing with a rag in hand. "We've got about 20 minutes. Lily hesitated, then nodded. Better to know what she was dealing with now than to be surprised later. She sat down on the bench, adjusted it slightly, and placed her hands on the keys. Starting with a simple C major scale, she tested the action and the sound. The piano was indeed out of tune, but not as badly as she had feared. Some notes were slightly sharp or flat, but nothing that would make casual listeners wince. The middle register was actually quite nice, warm and resonant. She tried a few chords, getting a feel for the instrument, then played the introduction to one of the jazz standards she had practiced that morning. The sound filled the empty diner, bouncing off the tile floors and large windows. "Well, I'll be," Frank said, grinning. "That already sounds 10 times better than old Tom's playing." "No offense to Tom," Lily smiled despite her nervousness. The piano wasn't perfect, but she could work with it. As she continued to play softly, letting her fingers reacquaint themselves with the feeling of a different instrument, the first customers began to arrive. "Save something for later," Frank said with a wink. and Lily closed the fallboard reluctantly. It had felt good to play, even just for those few minutes. The morning passed in the usual flurry of activity. Being short-staffed meant Lily had to move even faster than normal, taking orders, refilling coffee cups, and carrying plates. By 9:30, almost every table was full, and there was a small line at the door. Sunday brunch was always Donovan's busiest time. "It's crazy today," said Miguel, the other server on duty, as they passed each other by the kitchen. "Full house already." At 5 minutes to 10, Frank caught Lily's eye and nodded toward the piano. Her stomach flipped. With the diner so busy and without Danny to help, how was she supposed to play? As if reading her mind, Frank called out, "Don't worry about your tables. Miguel and I will cover them while you're at the piano. Just do half an hour for now, see how it goes." Taking a deep breath, Lily finished serving her last order, then made her way to the piano. A few regular customers gave her curious looks as she sat down at the bench. She had carried trays past them hundreds of times, but they had never seen her in this role before. She started with something simple, a gentle arrangement of autumn leaves that wouldn't compete with conversations. As her fingers found the familiar patterns, some of her nervousness began to fade. This wasn't so different from playing at the senior center after all. Most people weren't really listening. The music was just atmosphere. But as she transitioned into the next piece, she noticed the noise level in the diner had decreased slightly. A few heads had turned toward the piano. She kept her eyes down, focusing on the keys, playing a bit more softly to compensate. When she finished that piece, there was a smattering of applause from the table nearest the piano. Lily glanced up, startled to see an elderly couple smiling at her. "That was lovely, dear," the woman said. "Do you know any Gershwin?" Lily nodded, surprised by the request. "Someone to watch over me?" "Perfect," the woman replied, her eyes lighting up. "That was our wedding song, wasn't it, Howard?" Her husband nodded, reaching across the table to take her hand. Lily began to play the requested song, her confidence growing slightly. As she played, she allowed herself to look around the diner more. Most people were still focused on their food and conversations. But here and there, she caught people pausing to listen, some tapping their fingers lightly on the table in time with the music. When half an hour had passed, she decided to play one more piece before returning to her serving duties. Without thinking too much about it, she chose Debussy's Clair de Lune, one of her favorites, though more complex than what she had planned to play today. As the first delicate notes filled the diner, she felt herself relaxing into the music, the way she did at home when playing just for herself. The piece required more concentration, and Lily found herself closing her eyes at certain passages, letting muscle memory guide her fingers across the keys. She had played this so many times she knew every note by heart. For a few moments she forgot where she was, forgot about the customers, the coffee cups, the orders waiting to be taken. When the final notes faded away, the silence that followed surprised her. She opened her eyes to find that many people in the diner had stopped eating to listen. The usual clatter of silverware and hum of conversation had stilled. Then came the applause, not just from the elderly couple now, but from several tables throughout the diner. Lily felt her face grow warm as she stood from the bench. "That was beautiful," someone called out. "Are you a professional?" asked another voice, flustered by the attention. Lily smiled awkwardly and hurried back toward the counter, where Frank was standing with a look of amazement on his face. "Lily," he said quietly, "you said you played a little, and that wasn't a little." She grabbed her order pad, desperate to return to the familiar routine. "I should get back to my tables." "Hold on," Frank said, putting a hand on her arm to stop her. "People loved it. Would you mind playing another set later? Maybe around 11:30? "Miguel and I can manage." Lily looked around the diner. Several people were still looking her way, smiling appreciatively. The elderly woman whose request she had played gave her a little wave. Something shifted inside Lily in that moment. She had been so afraid that playing in public again would hurt too much, would only remind her of what she had lost. Instead, she felt a small spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Joy. Pure, simple joy in sharing music with others. "Okay," she agreed, tucking her order pad back into her apron. "I can do another set." For the next hour, she returned to serving, but something was different. Customers who had heard her play looked at her differently, asked her questions about the music. The elderly couple told her the story of their wedding day 62 years ago. A young girl about 7 years old confessed that she had just started piano lessons, and wanted to know how long Lily had been playing. "Since I was about your age," Lily told her with a smile. By the time she returned to the piano for her second set, word had spread. The diner was still full and people seemed to be lingering over their coffee longer than usual. As she sat down at the bench again, there was an expectant hush. This time, Lily didn't shy away from playing pieces she loved. She still kept it appropriate for a Sunday brunch, nothing too dramatic or intense, but she allowed more of her training and passion to show through. She played some Chopin preludes, a movement from a Mozart sonata, and even took requests from the audience. When Frank finally signaled that they needed to start preparing for the dinner crowd, Lily was surprised to find that she had been playing for almost an hour. As she rose from the bench, the entire diner erupted in applause. Walking back to the counter, she felt lighter somehow, as if something heavy she had been carrying had been set down at last. "Same time next Sunday?" Frank asked, a knowing smile on his face. Lily thought about it for only a moment. "Yes," she said. "I'd like that." As she helped clean up after the brunch crowd, Lily noticed a business card left on the counter near the register. It was slightly coffee-stained, but she could clearly read the name. Dr. Thomas Wilson, Director, Cleveland Music Academy. On the back, scrawled in blue ink, was a simple message: "Extraordinary playing. Please call me if you're interested in discussing opportunities." Lily stared at the card, her heart beating faster. She slipped it into her pocket, not sure what she would do with it yet, but feeling for the first time in years that doors she had thought permanently closed might be opening again. The business card sat on Lily's small kitchen table for 3 days. She would glance at it while eating breakfast, pick it up and turn it over in her hands during dinner, then put it back down again. Dr. Thomas Wilson, Director, Cleveland Music Academy. The possibility it represented both thrilled and terrified her. What's the worst that could happen? She asked herself on Wednesday night as she practiced at her piano. He could say no, or offer something I can't accept. Then I'd be exactly where I am now. Yet she couldn't bring herself to make the call. Part of her, the practical part that had learned to survive these past few years, argued that getting her hopes up would only lead to disappointment. What kind of opportunities could someone like Dr. Wilson offer a college dropout who waited tables? Probably just a chance to play background music at Academy fundraisers. Besides, her life was stable now. Not exciting, but stable. But another part of her, the part that still dreamed in melodies and harmonies, couldn't stop wondering. On Thursday, Lily arrived at Donovan's for her afternoon shift to find a small surprise waiting. Frank had hired someone to tune the old piano. "Thought it might need some attention if you're going to keep playing on Sundays," he explained with a shrug when she thanked him. "Guy owed me a favor anyway." The piano tuner, an older gentleman with thick glasses and nimble hands, was just finishing up. "Beautiful old instrument," he told Lily as he closed the fallboard. "Just needed some TLC. Has good bones, as they say." "Thank you," Lily said, running her hand along the freshly polished wood. "I'm sure it'll sound much better now." "Oh, it will. Say, Frank mentioned you're quite the player. Classically trained." Lily nodded, feeling a familiar pang at the reminder of her incomplete education. "Thought so. You can always tell," he said, packing up his tools. "The way you handle the instrument. There's a difference between someone who just plays and someone who understands the piano." His words stayed with her throughout her shift. Someone who understands the piano. That was her. For better or worse, music wasn't just something she did, it was part of who she was. And maybe that's why she had felt so adrift these past few years, working jobs that paid the bills but left her feeling hollow. By closing time, she had made her decision. She would call Dr. Wilson tomorrow. Friday morning found Lily pacing her tiny apartment, phone in hand. She had rehearsed what to say, but each time she started to dial, her courage faltered. What if he didn't remember her? What if he had left the card as a polite gesture, with no real interest? What if she was setting herself up for heartbreak? "Just do it," she finally told herself firmly. "You've faced worse things than an awkward phone call." She dialed the number before she could change her mind again. "Cleveland Music Academy, how may I direct your call?" Answered a friendly female voice. I'm calling for Dr. Wilson. My name is Lily Chen. He left his card at the diner where I work." "Oh, yes, Dr. Wilson mentioned you might call. Let me see if he's available." A brief hold and then a deep, warm voice came on the line. "Ms. Chen, I'm so glad you called. I was beginning to think you might not. I wasn't sure what to make of your card, Lily admitted. Perfectly understandable. Let me explain why I left it. I happened to be having brunch at Donovan's last Sunday. My wife and I go there occasionally. And I was absolutely stunned by your playing. It's rare to hear that level of musicianship in a casual setting. I found myself wondering what your story might be. Lily swallowed hard. It's not very exciting. I studied piano at Eastman for 2 years, but had to leave for family reasons. Now I work at the diner. Eastman is one of the finest music schools in the country, Dr. Wilson said, sounding impressed. May I ask who your teacher was there? Dr. Abigail Huang. Ah, I know Abby well. We served on a competition jury together a few years back. She's a wonderful pianist and teacher. The conversation flowed more easily after that, as they discussed mutual connections in the music world. Dr. Wilson asked thoughtful questions about her training and experience, never prying into the personal circumstances that had forced her to leave school. Ms. Chen, may I call you Lily? I would very much like to hear you play in a proper setting. The academy has a small recital hall with an excellent Steinway. Would you be willing to come in sometime next week? Lily's pulse quickened. To play for you? Yes, just informally. I have some ideas I'd like to discuss with you, but first I'd like to hear you play something of your choosing on a proper instrument. I'm not sure if I'm ready for that, Lily said honestly. It's been a long time since I've played for anyone who really knows music. That's perfectly all right. This isn't an audition, just a chance for us to explore possibilities. No pressure at all, and based on what I heard at the diner, you have nothing to worry about. After checking her work schedule, Lily agreed to meet Dr. Wilson at the academy the following Tuesday afternoon. As she hung up the phone, a mixture of excitement and anxiety swirled in her stomach. What had she just gotten herself into? The weekend passed in a blur. Sunday brunch at Donovan's was even busier than the previous week, with several customers telling Lily they had come specifically to hear her play. Word had spread about the waitress with the extraordinary talent. She played 2 full sets, and this time she was more comfortable, allowing herself to enjoy the experience rather than just endure it. You're becoming quite the draw, Frank teased as he handed her the day's tips, which were nearly double what she normally made on Sundays. By Tuesday, Lily's nerves were stretched to the breaking point. She had practiced every spare moment, trying to decide what to play for Dr. Wilson. Something challenging enough to showcase her abilities, but not so difficult that she would stumble after years without formal training. Finally, she settled on the first movement of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata and a Chopin etude she had always played well. The Cleveland Music Academy was housed in a beautiful old building near University Circle. As Lily climbed the stone steps to the entrance, she felt like an imposter. Students carrying instrument cases passed her, engaged in animated conversations about rehearsals and theory classes. This was a world she had once belonged to, but now felt so distant from. At the reception desk, she gave her name and was directed to the 3rd floor. Dr. Wilson was waiting for her in a hallway lined with practice rooms, each emitting different sounds, a violin scaling upward, a clarinet repeating a difficult passage, a soprano voice soaring. Lily, thank you for coming. Dr. Wilson shook her hand warmly. The recital hall is this way. He led her to a small but beautiful space with perfect acoustics and a gleaming black grand piano on a raised platform. The hall was empty except for a woman sitting in the front row, petite, elegantly dressed with silver-streaked dark hair. This is my wife, Grace, Dr. Wilson said. She was with me at the diner and insisted on coming today. She hasn't stopped talking about your playing. Grace stood and took Lily's hands in hers. You brought tears to my eyes with that Debussy, she said. I used to play myself years ago before arthritis made it too difficult. Lily thanked her, touched by the woman's enthusiasm. Dr. Wilson gestured to the piano. Please take your time. Get acquainted with the instrument. We're in no rush. As Lily approached the Steinway, she felt a familiar reverence. This was a concert grand, far superior to anything she had played in years. She sat at the bench and placed her hands on the keys, feeling their weight and response as she played a few warm-up exercises. The action was perfect, responsive but not too light. The tone was rich and full. After a few minutes of warming up, she took a deep breath and began the Moonlight Sonata. From the first notes, she knew this was different from playing at the diner. There, the music had been secondary to people's conversations and meals. Here, in this space designed for music, every nuance mattered. The incredible piano responded to her most delicate touch, allowing her to shape phrases exactly as she intended. As she played, the years of waiting tables and making do seemed to fall away. This was who she truly was. When she finished the Beethoven and moved seamlessly into the Chopin, she closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her. The etude was technically challenging, with rapid passages that required precision and control, but her fingers remembered. Years of practicing at night after long shifts had kept her technique from deteriorating too much. When she played the final chord, the small hall resonated for a moment before falling silent. Lily opened her eyes to see both Dr. Wilson and his wife staring at her with expressions of genuine admiration. "Remarkable," Dr. Wilson said quietly. "Simply remarkable." Grace was wiping away a tear. "You must miss it terribly," she said. "Playing like that?" Lily nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She did miss it. The challenge, the beauty, the way music could express what words could not. Dr. Wilson came to stand beside the piano. "Lily, I'd like to offer you a position at the academy. We need a piano instructor for our community program, teaching children and adults who want to learn but aren't pursuing professional careers. The pay isn't extraordinary, but it would be steady, and you'd have access to our facilities, including this piano, for your own practice and development." Lily stared at him in shock. "But I never finished my degree. I'm not qualified." "Your playing just now tells me everything I need to know about your qualifications," he interrupted gently. "Degrees are useful, but they're not everything. You have a gift not just for playing, but for communicating through music. That's something that can't be taught." I don't know what to say," Lily stammered. "Say you'll think about it," Grace suggested. "Take a few days." "And there's one more thing," Dr. Wilson added. "The Academy sponsors a small recital series. We feature professional musicians, faculty, and occasionally exceptionally talented students. I'd like you to give a recital in the spring. Just a short program, perhaps 30 minutes. It would be a wonderful way to introduce you to the musical community here. A recital, a real recital, with a proper piano and an audience that came specifically to listen. It was something Lily hadn't dared to dream about in years. "That's very generous," she said carefully, "but I would need time to prepare. I haven't performed a full program in a long time." "Of course. The spring series doesn't begin until March. That gives you nearly 6 months. And as I said, it needn't be a long program. Just a few pieces that showcase your abilities." As Lily left the academy that afternoon, her head was spinning with possibilities. A job teaching piano, a recital, access to that magnificent Steinway. It wasn't the future she had once envisioned for herself. Touring concert halls, recording albums, teaching master classes. But it was a future with music at its center. And for now, that was enough. 2 weeks after her meeting at the Cleveland Music Academy, Lily found herself standing in front of a bright blue door with a brass nameplate that read, Studio 14. She took a deep breath, smoothed her skirt, and turned the handle. The small teaching studio contained an upright piano, a desk, 2 chairs, and not much else. But it was hers, at least for the 12 hours per week she would be teaching. Dr. Wilson had worked out a schedule that allowed her to keep her shifts at Donovan's while taking on 8 students to start. Her first student would be arriving in 15 minutes. Lily sat at the piano bench, straightening the music books she had carefully selected for different age levels and abilities. Her hands were trembling slightly. Teaching was an entirely new challenge. She remembered her own piano teachers over the years. Ms. Rivera, who had given her first lessons when she was just 6 years old. Mr. Cooper in high school, who had pushed her technique to new heights. And Dr. Huang at Eastman, who had shown her what it meant to truly interpret music, not just play the notes. What if she couldn't live up to their examples? What if she had nothing valuable to offer her students? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. A woman with kind eyes stood in the doorway holding the hand of a small boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old. "Ms. Chen, we're a bit early, I hope that's okay. I'm Nancy, and this is my son, Leo." Lily stood and greeted them with what she hoped was a confident smile. "It's nice to meet you both. Please come in, Leo." The boy entered cautiously, looking at the piano with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Leo has never played before, his mother explained, but he's been begging for lessons. I'll pick him up in 30 minutes. After Nancy left, Lily knelt down to Leo's level. So you want to learn piano? He nodded, eyes wide. Have you ever played any instrument before? He shook his head. That's okay. We all start somewhere. Can I show you something cool about the piano? For the next half hour, Lily forgot her nervousness as she showed Leo how the piano worked. The hammers that strike the strings, the pedals that change the sound, the pattern of white and black keys. She helped him find middle C and play his first 5-finger pattern. His face lit up when he successfully played hot cross buns with his right hand. When Nancy returned, Leo rushed to her. Mom, I played a real song. Lily felt a warm glow of satisfaction as she waved goodbye and prepared for her next student. Maybe she could do this after all. By the end of her first teaching day, Lily was exhausted but exhilarated. Her students had ranged from young Leo to a retired doctor who wanted to finally learn the instrument he'd admired all his life. Each presented different challenges and joys. She had 4 more students scheduled for Thursday, and Dr. Wilson mentioned that there was already interest from others who had heard the academy had a new teacher. When she arrived at Donovan's for her evening shift, Frank noticed the change in her immediately. Look at you, he said with a smile. You're practically glowing. Lily laughed as she tied on her apron. I'm just tired. First day teaching. So you took the job? That's great. How'd it go? Better than I expected, she admitted. It's different being on the other side, but I think I might be good at it. Course you are, Frank said confidently. Anyone who plays like you would be. As she moved through the diner taking orders and serving food, Lily felt as though she was walking in 2 worlds. Here she was still the reliable waitress who remembered how everyone liked their coffee, but now she was also Ms. Chen, the piano teacher who guided eager hands on the keyboard. The following Sunday at Donovan's brunch, Lily played with newfound energy. Her regular diner audience had grown, with people specifically coming during her piano sets. She now kept a notebook of requests that customers had made, everything from classical pieces to jazz standards to pop songs she'd worked out by ear. The piano lady is here, she overheard a little girl say as a family was being seated. The phrase made her smile. The piano lady. There were certainly worse things to be known as. After her final set, a young man approached her. He seemed vaguely familiar, but Lily couldn't place him. I hope you don't mind me bothering you, he said. I'm a music student at Cleveland State. I heard about you from Dr. Wilson. I take his music theory class. He mentioned you're giving a recital in the spring. That's the plan, Lily replied, still trying to remember where she might have seen him before. I'm also a photographer, he continued, pulling out a business card. I document concerts and recitals for students and faculty. I was wondering if you might need photos for your program or promotional materials. Promotional materials. The idea that she would need such things hadn't even occurred to Lily. This was all becoming more real by the day. I'm Josh, by the way, he said, extending his hand. I was here a couple weeks ago with friends when you were playing. Your Debussy was incredible. That's where she knew him from. He had been at a table near the window, one of a group of college students who had stayed for both her sets. Thank you, she said, taking his card. I'm not sure what I'll need yet, but I'll keep this. As the weeks passed, Lily settled into her new routine. Mornings at the academy teaching, afternoons and some evenings at Donovan's, late nights practicing for her recital. It was exhausting, but it was also the happiest she had been in years. The following Sunday at Donovan's brunch, Lily played with newfound energy. Her regular diner audience had grown, with people specifically coming during her piano sets. She now kept a notebook of requests that customers had made, everything from classical pieces to jazz standards to pop songs she'd worked out by ear. The piano lady is here, she overheard a little girl say as a family was being seated. The phrase made her smile. The piano lady. There were certainly worse things to be known as. After her final set, a young man approached her. He seemed vaguely familiar, but Lily couldn't place him. I hope you don't mind me bothering you, he said. I'm a music student at Cleveland State. I heard about you from Dr. Wilson. I take his music theory class. He mentioned you're giving a recital in the spring. That's the plan, Lily replied, still trying to remember where she might have seen him before. I'm also a photographer, he continued, pulling out a business card. I document concerts and recitals for students and faculty. I was wondering if you might need photos for your program or promotional materials. Promotional materials. The idea that she would need such things hadn't even occurred to Lily. This was all becoming more real by the day. I'm Josh, by the way, he said, extending his hand. I was here a couple weeks ago with friends when you were playing. Your Debussy was incredible. That's where she knew him from. He had been at a table near the window, one of a group of college students who had stayed for both her sets. Thank you, she said, taking his card. I'm not sure what I'll need yet, but I'll keep this. As the weeks passed, Lily settled into her new routine. Mornings at the academy teaching, afternoons and some evenings at Donovan's, late nights practicing for her recital. It was exhausting, but it was also the happiest she had been in years. Her apartment was now covered in sticky notes, reminders about student assignments, repertoire ideas for her recital, practice sections that needed extra attention. She had started a savings account, adding to it each week with the goal of eventually cutting back her diner hours to focus more on music. The only cloud on her horizon was choosing her recital program. Dr. Wilson had suggested including a mix of pieces, something Baroque, something classical, something romantic, and perhaps a more modern work. Keep it under 40 minutes total, he had advised. Better to leave them wanting more than to wear out your welcome. Lily had nodded, but privately she felt overwhelmed by the responsibility. This would be her formal introduction to Cleveland's musical community. What if they found her lacking? What if all those years away from serious study had damaged her artistry beyond repair? One evening in early November, Lily was practicing at the academy late into the night. Most of the building was empty, with just a few other dedicated students in far-off practice rooms. She was working on a particularly challenging passage in the Chopin ballade she had chosen as her centerpiece, when frustration overtook her. No matter how many times she practiced it, her fingers couldn't achieve the speed and clarity the music demanded. Tears of frustration stung her eyes. Maybe she was fooling herself. Maybe she was still just a waitress who played piano on the side, not a real musician anymore. Sounds like you're being too hard on yourself. Lily jumped at the voice and turned to see Grace Wilson standing in the doorway of the practice room. Mrs. Wilson, I didn't know anyone was listening. Please call me Grace. The older woman came in and sat in the single chair in the corner, and I was passing by on my way to meet Thomas for dinner. That's the ballade in G minor, isn't it? Lily nodded, wiping quickly at her eyes. I'm having trouble with it. It's a difficult piece, one of the most challenging in the repertoire. Why did you choose it? The question caught Lily off guard. It was one of the last pieces I was working on before I left school. I guess I wanted to prove to myself that I could still play it. Grace nodded thoughtfully. That's understandable. But is that the right reason to include it in your first recital, after so many years away from performing? Lily considered this. Probably not. What pieces bring you the most joy to play? When you're alone, just playing for yourself, what do you gravitate toward? Debussy, Lily answered without hesitation. Ravel, some Brahms. That's where your heart is then. Play what speaks to you, not what you think will impress others. It was simple advice, but it struck Lily as profound. She had been approaching her recital like it was an exam to pass, not an opportunity to share her love of music. Thank you, she said softly. I think I needed to hear that. Grace smiled and stood to leave. You're going to be wonderful, Lily. Thomas and I hear it in your playing already. Don't be afraid to let others see who you really are. After Grace left, Lily sat quietly at the piano for a long time, thinking about her words. Then she pulled out fresh sheet music and began to play. Not the challenging Chopin, but a Debussy prelude that had always touched her soul. The music filled the small room with colors and emotions that felt like home to her. For the first time since agreeing to the recital, Lily felt a shift from fear to anticipation. She wasn't just proving she could still play. She was sharing a part of herself that had been hidden away for too long. When she finally left the academy that night, she had the beginnings of a new recital program in mind, pieces that truly reflected who she was as a musician. On her walk home, her phone pinged with a text from Frank. TV crew confirmed for Sunday brunch. Human interest story about our piano-playing waitress. Wear something nice? Lily stopped in her tracks, reading the message twice to make sure she understood. A television crew? Coming to film her at Donovan's? Before she could process this new development, another text came through, this time from Dr. Wilson. Good news! Arts Council has agreed to sponsor your recital. We can now include it in the main concert series rather than the community programs. Are you ready to take this step? Standing alone on the nighttime street, Lily began to laugh. 6 months ago, she had been just a waitress with a hidden talent and buried dreams. Now her two worlds were colliding in ways she never could have imagined. Was she ready? She wasn't entirely sure, but for the first time in years, she was eager to find out. The television crew arrived at Donovan's early on Sunday morning. A woman with a clipboard introduced herself as the producer and explained how they would film during Lily's regular piano sets. They wanted shots of her waiting tables, then transitioning to the piano, and interviews with regular customers about the waitress with the hidden talent. Just pretend we're not here. The producer told her with a smile that suggested she knew how impossible that would be. Lily nodded nervously, smoothing down the blue dress she had chosen for the occasion. It was the nicest thing she owned, bought years ago for a cousin's wedding and rarely worn since. You look great, Frank assured her, seeming almost as anxious as she was. He had spent the previous day deep cleaning the diner, and had even put fresh flowers on each table. This is good for business. Good for you, too. The camera crew set up in corners of the diner, trying to stay out of the way as the first customers began to arrive. Word had spread about the filming, and by 9:30, there was a line out the door. Lily had never seen the place so busy. Despite the producer's advice, it was impossible to ignore the cameras. Lily felt self-conscious as she took orders and delivered plates, aware of every movement. When it came time for her first piano set, her hands trembled so badly she wasn't sure she would be able to play. But as soon as her fingers touched the keys and the first notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the diner, everything else faded away. The cameras, the crowd, her nervousness, all dissolved into the music. This piece had become her signature at Donovan's, the one customers requested most often. As she played, she noticed the elderly couple who had been her first fans sitting at their usual table. They had come every Sunday since that first day, and the woman always requested Gershwin's "Someone to Watch Over Me." Today they held hands across the table, listening with soft smiles on their faces. Near the window sat Leo, her youngest piano student, with his mother. He waved excitedly when he caught her eye. Dr. and Grace Wilson were there too, along with several of her other students and colleagues from the academy. And then Lily spotted someone she hadn't seen in years. Her former teacher, Dr. Huang, sitting near the back of the diner with an expression of quiet pride on her face. The sight of her mentor made Lily's heart skip a beat, but she didn't falter in her playing. Instead, she channeled her surprise into the music, adding an extra layer of emotion to the piece. When she finished her set, the diner erupted in applause. As she stood from the bench, Dr. Huang approached her. "Your playing has matured," she said, embracing Lily warmly. "There's a depth to it now that comes only through living. What are you doing here?" Lily asked, still stunned to see her former teacher. "Thomas Wilson is an old friend. He called me a few months ago, very excited about a former student of mine he had discovered playing in a diner. I had to come see for myself," she smiled. "I'm in town for a conference, but I've arranged to stay an extra day to attend your recital tomorrow." Lily's recital. With everything happening at the diner, she had almost forgotten that her debut at the Cleveland Music Academy was the next evening. Months of preparation, of late-night practice sessions and carefully selected repertoire, all leading to tomorrow night. "I'm nervous," Lily admitted. "Good," Dr. Huang replied with a knowing smile. "That means you care. But remember what I always told you? The audience wants you to succeed," Lily finished the familiar phrase. "They're not looking for mistakes. They're looking for beauty." The rest of the day passed in a blur. The television crew filmed her second set, interviewed Frank and several regular customers, and finally sat Lily down for her own interview. They asked about her background, her training, how she had ended up working at the diner, and how it felt to be returning to music professionally. "I never really left music," Lily told them honestly. "Even during the hardest times when I could barely keep the lights on, I still played. I had to. It's not just what I do. It's who I am." By the time the crew packed up and the last customer left, Lily was exhausted. Frank handed her an envelope with her day's tips, more than she usually made in a week. "You deserve every penny," he said when she tried to protest. "You've brought something special to this place." That night, Lily could barely sleep. Her recital dress, A simple but elegant black gown she had found at a consignment shop hung on her closet door. Her music was organized and memorized. There was nothing left to do but rest and prepare mentally. Yet her mind raced with all the possible ways tomorrow could go. What if she forgot the music? What if she embarrassed herself in front of Dr. Huang and all her new colleagues? What if this whole journey from that first Sunday at the diner piano to the teaching position to the recital was just a brief detour before reality set in again? She finally dozed off in the early morning hours, waking to sunshine streaming through her window and a text message from Grace. Remember to breathe. Remember why you play. The rest will take care of itself. The recital hall at the Cleveland Music Academy was filled to capacity that evening. Dr. Wilson had warned Lily that interest was high, but she hadn't expected to see every seat taken. In the front row sat Dr. Huang next to Grace and Dr. Wilson. Frank had closed the diner early and brought the entire staff. The elderly couple from Sunday brunches were there, as were several of her students and their families. Even Josh, the photographer who had approached her at the diner, was present, his camera ready to document the evening. Backstage, Lily took deep breaths, trying to calm her racing heart. The beautiful Steinway waited on the stage, lid raised, gleaming under the lights. In just a few minutes, she would walk out there and play a full program for the first time since leaving Eastman. A stagehand gave her a 5-minute warning. Lily closed her eyes and thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The heartbreak of leaving school, the struggle to rebuild her life, the unexpected second chance that had begun with Frank asking her to fill in for the regular piano player at Sunday brunch. She thought of all the people who had helped her along the way, some without even realizing it. The customers who had requested songs and applauded her playing, Leo and her other students who reminded her why music mattered, Frank who had believed in her talent before anyone else. When the stagehand returned to escort her to the stage, Lily was ready. The nervousness hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into a different kind of energy, focused, purposeful. She walked onto the stage to warm applause, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. As her eyes adjusted, she could make out faces in the audience, smiling, expectant, supportive. She bowed, then seated herself at the piano. For a moment, she simply sat with her hands resting lightly on her lap, gathering her thoughts. Then she placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. Her program opened with Bach, clean, precise, mathematical. She had chosen a prelude and fugue that showcased technical skill while setting a contemplative tone. From there, she moved to Mozart, then to her beloved Debussy and Ravel pieces that painted sonic pictures for the audience. She concluded with Brahms, passionate and full of emotion. As she played the final piece, Lily felt a sense of rightness wash over her. This was where she belonged. Not necessarily on a stage, though that was wonderful in its own way, but with music at the center of her life. Teaching, performing, sharing the gift that had sustained her through difficult times. The final notes of the Brahms intermezzo faded away. For a heartbeat, there was complete silence in the hall. Then came the applause, thunderous, immediate, accompanied by cheers and even a few standing ovations. Lily rose from the bench and bowed deeply, tears of joy and relief stinging her eyes. As she straightened, she saw Dr. Huang on her feet, applauding with unrestrained enthusiasm. Frank was wiping his eyes unashamedly. Dr. Wilson was beaming like a proud father. After taking 2 more bows, Lily returned to the piano for her encore, a piece she hadn't listed in the program. It was Gershwin's "Someone to Watch Over Me," arranged as an instrumental. As she played this final selection, she looked directly at the elderly couple from the diner, who were holding hands and crying openly. When the recital ended and she had taken her final bows, Lily was flooded with well-wishers backstage. Dr. Huang embraced her warmly. "You found your voice," she said. "Not the one I was trying to help you develop years ago, but your own. It's beautiful." Frank pushed through the crowd to give her a bouquet of flowers. "So," he said with a twinkle in his eye, "does this mean you're giving up your day job?" Lily laughed, but before she could answer, Dr. Wilson approached with a man she didn't recognize. "Lily, I'd like you to meet Robert Chen, no relation, I assume, from the Cleveland Orchestra. He's interested in discussing some possibilities with you." As the crowd continued to swirl around her, Lily took a moment to absorb what was happening. The journey that had begun with a simple request to play piano during Sunday brunch had led here, Not to fame or fortune, but to something more valuable. A life reconnected with her true passion. She would keep teaching at the academy. She might even keep some shifts at Donovan's where it had all started, and now apparently there might be new opportunities with the orchestra. But whatever came next, Lily knew one thing for certain. She would never again let music slip from the center of her life. It had always been there, waiting patiently, like the old piano in the corner of the diner, ready for the moment when someone would finally lift the cover and play.